And we are live. Hello, everyone. I'm Magno. I'm the CEO and founder of Scientia. I'm very glad to have with me today Maciej Bukczynski from Darkhorse Analytics. He leads the Emergency Services Division of Darkhorse Analytics, an analytics and data visualization consulting firm based in Canada. Building on a foundation of research from the University of Alberta, his team helps emergency services providers implement analytical thinking and evidence based decision making in their operations. I also have with me David O'Keefe. He's proud to work alongside the brilliant PhD experts at Gurobi who help companies solve business problems as math models. David O'Keefe has 25 years of experience as a technology, sales, and marketing executive, entrepreneur, and software developer. Prior to joining Gurobi, he was country manager in Brazil for Telefonica Luca, the, the data insights, mobile advertising, and AI solutions unit of Telefonica Global. There, he drove data monetization and led groundbreaking projects with enterprise and public sector clients, international development organizations, and academic partners. He has spoken about big data at technology, advertising, retail, urban mobility, tourism, and sustainability conferences. Finally, I have Emmanuel Marchal, engineer in applied mathematics at the Université Catholique de Leuven in Belgium. How was my pronunciation? Love to try to speak in French.
Quite good, quite good.
Emmanuel has more than 14 years of experience in supporting C level executives in their decision making all over the world. His work at Cassotis has been dedicated to developing the Quandect software and applying the theoretical concepts of microeconomics and optimization to various complex industrial processes. And just to end, I am Magno Silva, as I said, the founder and CEO of Scientia. We're a startup specialized in developing custom AI solutions for international companies. We work with machine learning, operations research, and automation projects, mostly for companies in the US and Europe, applying our skills and technologies to solve business problems. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This live is part of our AI Against COVID hackathon. This is a hackathon that I came up with, and I had the pleasure of having the help of Estatidados and Casa da Pesquisa Operacional, which translates to the House of Operations Research. Um, this idea for this hackathon was after seeing so many terrible news here in Brazil about the COVID and also abroad, especially now in India, and feeling quite powerless. I felt like we had to try something. In the beginning, I thought, when I started thinking about organizing this event, I thought, well, I must be crazy because we're just a small startup from Brazil. How are we supposed to do this? Right. But then I thought, well, maybe with a little help from my friends. And so I started contacting people. We started getting more and more support, and this has been amazing. I can't thank you enough. All the people there, the mentors, the organizers, um, the presenters we have here today, the presenters we have had before. I mean, I can't thank you enough. This is for a great humanitarian cause, something very important that actually um, affects real people, right? And with hopefully with this event, we can drive some, build some real solutions to help real people. And I actually found out this week that I also have COVID. I just figured it out. I'm doing great, thank God. But it's something that sneaks up on you. You have no idea, and something that we should be very, very careful and be very mindful. And for this, I again thank you all. So let's start with my great friend Maciej Bukczynski from Darkhorse Analytics with his presentation. You can go ahead, my friend.
Hey, thank you very much, Magno. I appreciate the introduction. Today I'll be talking a little bit about the work that that I do, or my team and I do at Darkhorse. Not specifically COVID related, but our tools have certainly been used by our clients to help manage their response. A lot of them have been stretched for resources, whether it's people calling in sick or increased demand, or shorter or longer response times due to the protocols they have to follow. It's certainly very applicable in these times. In general, what we do at Darkhorse is we work with fire and EMS, ambulance, a little bit with police and other emergency service providers to improve their response time, to make good decisions about where to locate their resources and how to plan for the future most cost effectively and have the biggest impact for their communities. So I guess I'll begin with what's the purpose of an ambulance service? Why do we even have ambulances? And the answer is pretty obvious: to save lives. It would be the highest goal. Why is response performance important to this purpose? Well, here's an example for the most serious cardiac events, how survival rate changes. That's the blue line here, based on how fast an emergency responder can arrive at the scene. Getting to the incident quickly allows for the best chance of saving lives. And then the placement of resources can contribute to a better response performance. So the city needs ambulances in the right place, have the best opportunity to consistently respond to calls within an appropriate time target. So that's what I'm going to focus on today: strategic deployment, placement of stations, units, paramedics within those units, how we plan for that. So I'm going to do it with using a fictional city. I'm going to call it College Town. This is College Town. And let's just pretend you're the new chief in College Town. You've inherited 4 stations, 5 ambulances, 60 paramedics running those ambulances in shifts. And you're talking with the mayor of the town, and you might just be able to get some budget for 1 new truck and some personnel to staff it. If only you can make a good case about where you need it and how much it's going to help. So let's get familiar with the city. We have 4 stations kind of spread out throughout the city. One of them has 2 units in it. You don't know why they've been placed like this. That's just historically what's happened. But you want to make sure that the deployment is right. So you want to optimize the placement of your resources. So you brought on Darkhorse. Where do we start? So where should I place my resources? How do we model that? So where we start with is have a theory that the simplest model always wins. Overly complex models, they tend to overfit and become very narrowly focused. If you can't explain in simple terms how they work, decision makers aren't going to trust the outputs. You don't want some sort of a black box making decisions inexplicably. But we need to make sure that it's not too simple, right? So the simplest possible model that actually answers the question at hand. So let's build this model. What would a good starting point be? So historically, services have just used an equidistant approach. You're expanding the city. Oh wow, this station feels a little bit far from the last station. Let's put a new station in this new community, right? We'll put a new station every 5 kilometers. That sounds about right. Maybe you divide the city into grids. But is it enough? What kind of problems do we have? Well, so this solution would treat every location as equal. And we know that's not true. Demand isn't equally spaced. It's a little bit lumpy. There's some neighborhoods that are a little bit busier than others. You have some seniors residences, driving a lot of demand here. You have a busy downtown area over there. You have a high traffic collision freeway somewhere else. So this doesn't really address that at all. And it only applies to stations, not units within those stations. Right? Perhaps some areas are so busy, you might need more than one unit in a particular station. So, so the next kind of model that we move to and some services use is a gravity model. You build stations, assign trucks where there's the highest demand. Simple enough. Find the busy areas, assign the units there. That gets us closer, but there's still a few problems with this approach. Poor station locations to begin with, perhaps, right? So, you know, you have some historical stations and you just assume, well, let's keep putting more units in those stations. But what if those stations are the wrong place to begin with? And it doesn't take into account natural boundaries, like rivers, elevation, traffic issues. And so just because you're closer to areas with high demand doesn't mean you're optimally positioned to serve their needs. So we need to add some more complexity to the model. Enter the road network. Right? So we have Google, forget Google, we have open source tools, OpenStreetMap, lets us get all kinds of awesome data. We can find distances and average speeds from point to point. We can look at drive times across the city. Where can we get to? Where can't we get to? But there's some more problems with this model. It treats all vehicles the same, right? And it's a little bit biased towards calls that are farther away. What happens is ambulances and fire trucks, they behave a little bit differently than normal vehicles. Typically faster cruising speeds. They can go down a one-way street for a short distance. They can ignore that, you know, the no left turn restriction, things like that. And so the typical drive time models that you get actually don't do a great job of predicting how fast or what route an ambulance would take. So we model some speed parameters, service-specific speed parameters. So what we do is we'll model the drive time using the traditional tools to predict which route they would have taken, how fast we expect they would have gotten there. But then we actually also, that's one great thing about working with these types of services, is they tend to have great data, usually great data, they have lots of timestamps. They know exactly when the call came in. They know when they dispatched the ambulance. They know when the ambulance left the station. They know when it arrived on scene. We have timestamps for every event. And if we're lucky, we have AVL data. We know the exact location of the vehicle at each of these timestamps. So what we do is we can tune the drive time model to the service's actual responses, and get a much better sense of how fast that service can drive in that neighborhood at that time. Now, and if we didn't do this, what would tend to happen is we would spread our vehicles out way too much. So we can accurately predict the average drive time to any location, but is this good enough? Not quite. We need to leave the land of the deterministic and move into the land of the stochastic, because we have drive time variability. So when you look at most drive time estimates, all you really get is a single number for a particular route, right? To go from this station to that senior's residence, it's going to be 180 seconds. Okay, what does that mean though? That means that about half the time it's going to be less than 180 seconds, and half the time it's going to be more than 180 seconds. The way that services really measure their response time, we need to look at the entire distribution. And so emergency services, they set targets at the 90th percentile. We don't care about the average. We want 9 out of 10 responses to be within the target time. Luckily, travel times at each distance follow a log normal distribution. And since we have a really rich set of actual responses, we can model it with some simple parameters. So, our drive time model not only takes into account the tuning it to the average speed and acceleration rates within a particular neighborhood, but we also have a model of the variability that occurs at each distance within that neighborhood, and we can use it to basically model this curve to any location in a city. So now we have an accurate drive time model, probabilistic coverage, target time coverage. So we have call demand, we have a detailed road network, we have speed parameters, we have travel time variability, and that's basically all we need to deal with proximity, right? If we had used a linear approach, all of our trucks would end up in a busy area. It'd be too dense. If we didn't have variability, they'd be too sparse. You'd have too few trucks all over the place. And so you might ask, is this all necessary? Couldn't we have a simpler model? Yes, it absolutely is. We've done a lot of tests on this, and the model is very sensitive to inaccuracies in the drive times. So getting it exactly right as to what's true for that service is key. Okay, so we've dealt with proximity. What about availability? Just because we have a station, a unit stationed in a particular place, doesn't mean that it's available, right? They might be busy on another call. There's maintenance, they're off on training. Could we just match demand and supply? Could we spread out the trucks so that the calls per truck are nearly equal at each station? Unfortunately, no. So unit availability is not a linear relationship. Just because a truck is twice as busy doesn't mean that you need twice as many trucks. This is where basic queuing theory comes in, right? There's going to be downtime there, right? If you can handle more than twice as many customers with twice as many servers, right? So the problem is we can't use basic queuing theory because we have to apply it spatially as well. Otherwise, we'll end up putting too many trucks in our busy stations. So here we have some fancier math, and this is one I can't speak to super eloquently. This math on the left is a piece of a core of a doctoral thesis written by Dr. Susan Budge from the University of Alberta, probably 20-ish years ago now, and it solves a spatial queuing problem. So don't have too much time to explore it fully today, but I'll kind of the gist of it is if you have a call, if you have a call near a station, you're going to send the closest unit. If you have another call close to that station, but that one unit is busy, then you're going to need to send one from a further station, but now that unit is going to be busier for another call. So it sort of does this recursive thing where it basically makes units busier and busier, and then reallocates the calls to the units that aren't busy, something like that. And so it's solved. So basically this is the core of our deployment model. Is all of these different pieces sort of layered together. We don't fully address all of the other complexities, but they're important to understand, and this is where the subjective side of the equation starts to come into play. You know, I'm not going to read the whole list here, but there's all kinds of other things to consider, right? The people in the room that you're working with, they understand this the best. You know, maybe one particular station, you want to add a new unit there, but it's 50 years old and it's falling apart, and there's only room for one truck there, and you know, you would have to rebuild it. So how does that factor in? What about setup times? What happens before they start driving? Could the call taker dispatch them quicker, right? Is there something that they could do to just get out the door quicker? So, you know, could they, for example, with firefighters, you know, sometimes an intervention as simple as move the boot rack closer to the truck so they don't have to walk around the truck and then back. You know, simple things like that can shave off as much time off their response as if you had built a new station, right? And one is obviously cheaper of an intervention than another. So there's a lot to consider there. And then you know, there's politics. I've got a slide for that. It starts to become very political. And you know, usually these projects become part of a larger needs assessment study or a master plan or something like that. You know, the service would love more stations. They'd love more ambulances. They need more people. They also need better equipment, and they need training, and they need management, and you know, and also you're competing with the city or the province or state for all kinds of other things with the budget, right? And so you kind of have to embrace it, unfortunately, because if we just stopped at the modeling side of things, we would never actually get anything accomplished, right? The service would say, hey, great, this is where we should build a new station, but they also need to convince a decision maker that a new station is more important than you know, the rec center that they had also planned to build there or something. So our model is only as good as its objective function, right? What are we doing? We're saving lives and property by optimally allocating resources. That's fantastic. But from a city or country perspective, that's not the only way to save lives, right? So so you're still just one piece of that larger puzzle, and it's important to keep that context in mind. Okay, so how do we convince somebody that our model is right? We need to sell it. How do we sell it? Not with dollars. I mean, sell the idea. You know, how do we know that this is right? This is I think where a good tool comes in, and something that the decision makers can use interactively, see what all the trade-offs are, and you know, come up with a solution that isn't just some consultant's recommendation, but it's really something they own, and they can take responsibility for themselves. So I'm just going to flip over to this is our model in action in College Town. So we see that they have these 4 stations, and there are units inside each station. We can say add a new unit right here. We see our performance has increased by 0.9%. Maybe we want to move this station over here. Okay, that reruns the modeling here. Now we're at, we've improved by 1.4% if we could move that station. And you know, this area in the northwest here looks a little bit underserved. So yeah, we can get a really big improvement if we put something in that area. Obviously, the real analysis would be a little bit more complex. We do also actually use Gurobi to solve the initial location problem. So where are the optimal placement of stations? That's a that's a linear programming model that we use quite frequently. And we'll do that with, we'll forecast future demand, different call types, et cetera. And yeah, can really dive into the weeds here. But that's it. That's all I have for my presentation. So thanks for letting me talk. And if there's any, I don't know if we do questions or anything like that, but I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Maciej. I certainly thought it was pretty interesting, especially when you talked about the other aspects that actually affect an optimization problem. It shows that exact math is not really exact in real life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because first of all, it's impossible to actually model every single detail. And I'm pretty sure everybody that ever worked with mathematical modeling, applied mathematics, knows this very well. But we also have a lot of subjective restrictions and subjective effects that come from politicians, from society, and so on, which kind of needs to change our approach to problems. And I see many people actually not respecting that, feeling like they need to force their models and their views and their mathematics into real life. But real life is way more complicated than that. It doesn't work like that, right? So I thought it was pretty interesting that you brought that up. Eli Ali asked if is it possible for you to share your slides?
Sure. Yeah, I could send you a copy if you know what to do with them from there.
Sure. I'll add after I get all the presentations. I'll add them to the description of the video. Okay, guys. Thank you. Now moving on to David O'Keefe and Emmanuel Marchal to talk about their presentation of vaccine distribution, right? Let me share my screen. I got their presentation over here. Control L.
Great. Okay.
Go ahead.
Excellent. Thanks, Magno. And great presentation, Maciej. Really super interesting, your topic, and great to hear the pitch of for Gurobi. It's nice to know that you're using it in your applications. Super happy to be here representing Gurobi in this webinar, and I really appreciate the invitation, Magno, to talk about how mathematical optimization can be applied to actions against COVID, which is, obviously one of the most dramatic societal challenge we're facing these days. Let me just start with a little bit about Gurobi itself. Magno, there we go.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, that looks good. Excellent. Yeah, so I'm only going to talk for a few minutes, but let me just spend a few seconds talking about Gurobi itself. So if you could click on to the next slide. So Gurobi was founded by three of the world's most renowned experts in mathematical programming. They had actually been working on a different solver for many years in a different company. And when that company was acquired, they moved on. They decided in 2008 to form their own company. And that company has one single mission, if you see on the next slide, which is to build the world's most powerful mathematical optimization solver. So Gurobi has one product. It's our solver, and all we do is focus on making that as good as it could possibly be. It is in many ways the world's fastest solver against many different benchmarks, and it is used by many of the world's most well-known brands. If you skip on to the next slide, you'll see more than 2,500 companies are using Gurobi Solver inside their applications today. Really, these are household name brands that are using our solver in mission critical applications, and in many industries. More than 40 industries, people are using using the solver, whether it's running airlines, planning telecommunications networks, in all kinds of financial transactions, trading, and portfolio optimization, in the power industry, etc. There's Gurobi is present in so many places. It's amazing, and it's not much of a household name, but really a lot of the world's economy runs on Gurobi. If you could skip on to the next slide, please. So Ed, actually, our CEO, wrote an article recently that was published in Forbes magazine about the different uses of mathematical optimization against the COVID pandemic. And I just wanted to pick up on that. The next three slides are based on that article and the points that he made. And the key thing is that there are many, many areas where mathematical optimization can improve decision making that governments and businesses are taking in response to the pandemic. Ultimately, a pandemic has exposed, and we've all seen it in the media, the limited resources that we have, particularly in our healthcare system, but not just in the healthcare system, and also the disruptions that the pandemic has caused to our economy. And all of those problems can be optimized using mathematical optimization. If you can create a model, you can optimize the solution to the problem. The one problem that I'd like to talk about today, together with Emmanuel from Cassotis, is the distribution and administration of vaccines, which is a major challenge. All the countries are going through it. I'm actually based in New York City, where quite a high percentage of people at this point have been vaccinated, and the city is opening up. But in Europe, it's a much more mixed set of circumstances. And Magno, you mentioned India as being one of the most difficult situations right now. In Brazil, I know it's also difficult. So it is a major challenge to produce and distribute and administer vaccines. So let's just talk a little bit about that as a problem that can be addressed with optimization. So if you could skip to the next slide. Oh, good. Yeah. So, just thinking at a high level about that problem, we have three major categories of decisions, right? Who's going to get the vaccine? Where are they going to get it? And when are they going to get it? Again, we're seeing how that plays out in the real world. In the United States, after a kind of a slow start, distribution went up very rapidly, very quickly. All kinds of distribution centers were just stood up in convention centers and different kinds of facilities that were available. I personally got my vaccine at a FEMA operation run in partnership with a large hospital chain in the state of New Jersey, and backed by the National Guard. So there were actually troops that were participating in that operation. So once the scale of the U.S. government got behind this effort, it really spun up very quickly. And in the early stages, the really key decision was about who, right? And it was clear from the get-go that the oldest citizens are the most affected by the COVID virus. Magno, I'm sorry to hear that you have it. I also had it in January. Thank God I had a mild case. My daughter had a mild case as well. But those mild cases in older people could often be fatal, or certainly were fatal at a much higher rate than in other age groups. So one of the key groups of people in that decision about who was to get the vaccine to the oldest people, but not just them, because also essential workers and frontline workers of different types were also much more exposed to and continue to be much more exposed to COVID than other people. So those people also needed to be considered in the decisions about who's going to get it, and then where and when, how to do it, how to get the vaccine out in scale, how to produce it, and how to get it out and about to where it can be actually injected into people's arms. And there are two basic methods to think about that problem from a management point of view. One is push, so thinking from top down. The planner is thinking about, all right, I have a number of objectives. One is to save as many people. Two is to get the vaccine out as quickly as possible, get everyone vaccinated as quickly as possible. And three is to get the essential people and the most exposed people covered as soon as possible. So you could have top-down planning, and we have had that in all the countries in the world that are dealing with vaccine allocation. At the same time, you have pull from the bottom up, which is basically people and their healthcare professionals requesting vaccines for people. So people are trying to sign up and get a spot in a place where they can get vaccinated. And so you're getting signals of demand, and you can distribute based on that demand. And that's basically what every country has done. If you skip to the next slide, you can see some other considerations about doing that. So you have, it's not just as simple as a technical who, where, when, and push or pull. It's also some major considerations. And when I hand off to Emmanuel, he'll talk about how you actually make a model out of this. But there are some very, very significant considerations when you're doing the distribution. One is fairness. Another is simplicity, variety, right? There are different kinds of vaccines. They have different strengths. They have different characteristics. I know in Brazil that they're using a vaccine that is more stable and doesn't need to be refrigerated at such a low temperature, and that's due to the challenges of distribution in Brazil, especially to more areas outside of the cities. So you have challenges around that, and then you have also challenges around the quantity and the production. So even with the best intentions, you're balancing a lot of considerations in your model. And with that, I'd like to hand off to Emmanuel, who will talk more about how you would make a mathematical model so that you could optimize the distribution of vaccines. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. So just continuing the presentation, and first maybe introducing my company. I'm working for Cassotis, which is a consulting firm actually doing mathematical models. We build customized solutions for our customers to solve very complex problems. And for sure, there are so many challenges with this pandemic that I'm very glad to be here to share maybe just a few experience and also to drive people who is participating to this hackathon to somehow use the right tool to solve a specific problem. So at Cassotis, we are solving mostly industrial processes, but actually we know that mathematics, we can represent anything. And for who would like to see different applications to the mathematical programming, I invited you to visit our website so that you can have a huge panel of different projects we worked on with different applications that you could potentially make some similarities with the problematic that you are trying to solve with artificial intelligence. My presentation will be quite actually theoretical, just for you to have an idea of what, and starting maybe by explaining what mathematical optimization is. So please, you can maybe switch the slides. The next slide, yeah. So the first thing that I wanted to make clear for all the audience is where mathematical programming locates in comparison with all the other techniques that are dealing with artificial intelligence. And so I decided to first present to you what we call the advanced analytics map, which is somehow the classification of different techniques. And also I will try to illustrate when and how and why you should use one techniques rather than another one, with a main focus then on the mathematical programming one. So first, to solve complex problem, you have two main techniques. One is based on model, a mathematical model. Another one will be based on the data. First, so on the left side, again, we should distinguish two types of techniques. One would be the real optimization, and another one would be a purely simulation model. I will come back to that one later. Again, we can split mathematical optimization in different words. One would definitely be the mathematical programming for all the problems that you are able, first, you are able to create a model. Seems obvious, but indeed, not all the problems have a real appropriate formulation, mathematical formulation, so equations that would describe the problem that you would like to solve. But once this is possible, this is definitely the best way to solve a problem. Why? Because you have so many solutions, algorithms. Gurobi is definitely one of them, and the best in class regarding mixed integer programming, which is a subclass of the mathematical programming, that will guarantee you to or reach the optimal solution that you are looking at, or at least to have an idea of what we call the gap, which is the difference, at least to give you an idea of how far you are for the potentially optimal solution. You know, so you have a rough estimate of how far you are from the optimal solution. And definitely I will describe this because this has been used to solve the problem that David's introduced in his presentation before. But before going there, I will just go through the other techniques for you to have an idea of, depending on the type of problem that you are solving, you might be interested in. Heuristics is somehow an alternative to mathematical programming that will solve the same type of problems, but maybe in an easier way, so with much more simplification, but you will solve it probably faster. And but on the other hand, you don't have any guarantee of optimality. You don't know how far you are. And actually, it's also something that you can use in combination with mathematical programming, because such solver like Gurobi actually like to have already initial solution, feasible solution to help in the real optimization that will be done by the solver. So actually, heuristic can also be combined together with mathematical programming. Then we have the simulation techniques that would probably solve different types of problem. And in terms of, or maybe in the context of the COVID-19 problems, we may think about the dimensioning of the number of attendance for to receive people coming at a specific place to get vaccinated. And you have to somehow determine by how much attendance you have to schedule at a certain time according to some forecast in the arrival time of people going to a certain queue to get vaccinated. And then it's a problem which is very difficult to formulate in terms of equations. So there we will probably go for a simulation model that will simulate the real life, and you will dimension your problem according to the result that you are actually simulating. So again, we are very far from optimization, but it's one way to solve a certain type of problems. From the database system, I would not. We can talk about it for hours. Machine learning is something that everybody knows a lot today because it's a very powerful tool that can also be used for decision making. But I would say that as it's rely only on data, I would only use it when it's really not possible for you to formulate a real problem, because then you are just somehow delegating all the modeling work to the intelligence that will just treat the data, and that will actually give you good insights, but again, not in an optimal way. So just describing a little bit more what mathematical problem is, we can look at the right side of the screen, where we have the three main components of a mathematical problem. The first thing to identify are the variables of your problem that will somehow create the space of solutions that you are interested in optimizing. Then you are somehow limited by constraints from different types that will then create a sub part of this whole domain, which is the feasible domain of your all solutions. And finally, you have an objective function that will be maximized, minimized, in order to reach the final solution, which satisfies all the constraints, and that will give you the optimal value for all your variables. And then, just for you to have an idea of the application of such a model, on the next slide, please, we have the formulation of the problem that David introduced. It's a quite complex problem, so we are trying to optimize the whole distribution of the vaccines. It was at the time of the H1N1 influenza, and there were so many variables that could be optimized at the same time that, in order to solve quickly the problem, the first thing that the people who developed that model did is to split the model. So first, they have a primary model that will take care about only a few topics that David presented at the end, which is the fairness. So here we have a mathematical formulation. You can see the concept that I have introduced before. There is one unique variable, which is Q. We have the objective function, which is the first line of the equations, and then a set of constraints. And then, by solving this problem with a solver, we can already have a first optimal solution for a proportional fairness of different type of vaccine in different regions, in order to attain different type of profile of person. You know, it's the same for the COVID. We first have priority groups for elderly people, and then we have the priority decreasing with respect to the age, inversely proportional. And then from this first model, they run another optimization in order to optimize then the simplicity and the geographic equity. And they do it that in a very elegant way. They are somehow allowing the second model to somehow reduce a little bit the objective. So we are losing a little bit of fairness, but we will gain a lot of simplicity and equity. Simplicity, it was a question of reducing the number of type of vaccines. So we can think about the different suppliers of a vaccine on different regions, you know, for logistics simplicity. And we have other objective, which is actually the way they solved the second model. They developed a model with a multiple objective, which is also always a right way to do in order to simplify the problem. So just as a conclusion, just to give you a few tips in order to create your mathematical problem for a very complex model. The first thing is that the formulation that we use is key. They are complex model, but they are complex problems. You have many models to solve it. Some models will be able to solve it, to crack it, and others not, depending on the formulation that you are using. So we have to spend a lot of time selecting the right formulation for a specific problem. And then once you have all your decisions that you have defined, and also your objective, you will try first to separate when it's possible, when you are not losing too much. Let's separate the problem in sub-problems that you will gain a lot of efficiency. I didn't mention that, but even if you have a very good solver, it could take years for you to have an optimal solution because of the size of the problem. So if you are able to split it in different sub-problems, you will definitely even potentially reach a better solution than if you would try to tackle the whole problem at once and trying to and letting the solver trying to solve it for a very long time. And the solver obviously will make a huge difference. So obviously, as I mentioned, Gurobi is definitely the best in class for those type of problems that I would highly recommend for solving such a model with mixed integer variables. So it was a quite technical presentation, but thank you for your attention. David is still here. I'm here also for your questions, if you have any.
Let's see. No questions at this time. I would like to comment though, something very interesting that you guys were bringing up. The vaccine distribution planning is something extremely complicated, and I follow a lot of. I actually watch CNN a lot. I like to follow what's going on over the U.S. And I do remember that in the beginning, the U.S. also had problems distributing the vaccine, but eventually things picked up a lot. And here in Brazil, we don't see too much planning. And for such a complicated problem, it's hard to just solve it by trying different ideas, right? Making an actual a model, a mathematical model, and actually solving it can make a huge difference. I don't know about you guys, but in my line, I've seen differences ranging from 20 to 30% cost reduction from actually using an optimized model in this case for school assignments, for schooling problems. And I mean, it's something huge, and in a situation as important and dangerous and costly as this one, and dealing not only in terms of cost, but in the situation of a lack of vaccines. Even if you had the money, there is a real physical constraint to what you can do. Working with optimization is ever more important, right? And the simple fact that you have multiple vaccines with different needs for transportation and for storage, people that need to take 2 doses, for most of them you need 2 doses in different time frames. So I mean, doing this by hand is very, very complicated. So I think this model you guys have been working on, this solution that you've shown us, is something that's really impressive. Okay.
Yeah, it was really nice to have a chance to talk about it.
Go ahead.
Just jump in. Yeah, I mean, no, it is an amazing. I mean, first societal problem, with incredible, terrible consequences, and as an optimization challenge, it's also quite amazing, because as you were saying, it exposed the lack of resources, or the limited nature of resources that we depend on, when we have a problem that's so much bigger than the scale that we've designed our responses for generally, and it's not just a question of throwing more resources at the problem. Even if you could do that, and over time we have managed to scale things up, like hospitals and and production and injections and so forth. But even that just takes time. But even if you can get all the resources to scale up your solution, you also have really important questions of fairness and just simplicity. How are you going to do this, and coverage, and it's just an amazing challenge, and it just shows how important optimization can be in society and what a difference it can make. It's not just something that you use in business; it's something that you can use to optimize and make the world a better place.
True. I love complex problems. I love a challenge. I must say, the integer programming problems are usually some of the ones I have the most fun with. But I also need to get reminded of the seriousness behind it. Otherwise, to me, it's just like having fun. And I mean, even though I enjoy it very much, I also need sometimes to be reminded of the actual impact that this has on the real life and on real people, right? Okay, so moving on to my presentation. So I am Magno, as you guys probably know by now. I'm the founder and CEO of Scientia. We like to say we work building math magic for businesses. I remember that in the beginning when I talked about our solutions, a lot of people talked about it being something like magic, something supernatural or otherworldly, and it really annoyed me because it was anything but. It was just mathematics, it was logic, it was a very clear scientific thought process. But eventually I just gave up and started leaning on it and using this phrase, math magic for businesses, and I guess everybody's happier for it. I'm in this case, we're going to talk about scheduling optimization, the nurse scheduling problem. It's a problem I worked with a company a few years ago. The problem involves mostly allocating available staff based on the demand for work. In real life, we have different locations, different hospitals and other health locations that have different demands, and you have lots of different staff types, nurses, assistant nurses, doctors, with a whole range of different specializations. So this becomes a very complex optimization problem about who should work when and where, right? And what people do, at least over here in Brazil, is have a very simple method for allocating professionals. They just have professionals working every other day, the morning shift and a night shift. They call it 12 by 36. So usually they work for 12 hours, they rest for 36 hours, and then they come back to work, right? So this makes allocating professionals something very simple, right? You just need to pick a shift and then work every other day. Still, they do have some problems, especially when people need to change shifts, when there's extra demand, when someone misses work. So they usually do some corrections by hand, but it's still manageable, at least normally, right? In normal situations. But now we have a huge health crisis upon us, and we have issues about what would be the optimal scheduling, the which hours they should work, we would need to understand if this system actually of working every other day actually works. If maybe reducing their shifts would be more optimal. The hours of each shift and working various days would sequential days might be better, or maybe you just there's also the case that people are talking a lot about over here about changing the hours of that people get to work and get off of work. Usually people work from 9 to 5, and the idea would be, what if we could change their initial and final hours, the shift's initial and final hours, to avoid the rush hours, and also maybe changing the shifts around for different professionals, so they don't all take the public transportation at the same time, which is what most people over here in our developing country like Brazil do. And it's considered one of the major vectors of infection. Everybody taking really crowded buses and trains and subways during the pandemics. Some of them don't even actually use protection, don't even use mask, and this is probably one of the greatest spreading mechanisms, especially among the working class here in Brazil. So thinking about how changing around the shifts, the times that different people work, is something extremely important. Our media sometimes talks about it like it's something simple, like people are just gonna wake up one day and automatically change their behavior, the way they work, and everything is going to be all right. But in real life, it's a very complex problem, and that you need some mathematical modeling to actually deal with it. So how do we add complexity to this original model that we had, which was just about working every other day, 12 hours and resting for 36, right? Well, one of the things that we could do is working with an optimization problem to avoid rush hours, and thinking about the number of employees that are actually necessary. So the number of employees is something that in our this is going to be our objective function, of a simplified version of it. Usually you want to minimize cost, which is something like a classical way to look at it. And since I'm an economist and my co-founder is also an economist, we're always very concerned about costs, something that is very important to us, especially considering we live in a developing country, so we don't have resources to splash around, although sometimes we behave like we do. We don't. And so the idea is, by working with a cost minimization problem, we can just pick the number of employees that are actually necessary. And by adding this second part, we can work with avoiding rush hours. So by taking the difference between the initial hour and 9 a.m., which would be the morning rush hour, and the final hour that the people get, the employees get off, and avoiding 5 p.m., which would be the end of the day rush hour, we can add this initial and final hour variables and in such a way that our optimizer is going to try to avoid these hours. And the way we introduce them in this problem is as a soft constraint. A hard constraint is something that you actually add to the list of constraints. A soft constraint is something that you want to treat as a nice to have instead of a must have. And so you can add this to the objective function, although the objective function would actually be counted in monetary terms, reais or dollars. You are adding hours over here. So the idea here is you can think of it as discounting costs based on this nice to have, or since the hourly works and the number of our contracted hours are not affected the way we built this model, it doesn't make much of a difference. It would be as similar to maximizing two different objective functions. And I know Gurobi has that option. If you wanted, you could, instead of having everything in a single function, you can solve for one function for cost first, and then for hours. And since they are independent in this problem, you wouldn't have any trouble. In terms of adding more complexity, we can think of different types of workers and the hours that they work. You can think of a full-time worker that works 40 hours a week, a part-time worker that works 20 hours a week but earns more. And you can also think in terms of overtime. If depending on the demand for hours that you have, it may not make sense to actually hire a new person. You might just contract some more hours from whoever is already working for you, right? Although it is more expensive, depending on the situation, it may make more sense to just contract some extra hours. There's also the question of shift types. In this problem we work with, you could have someone working 5 days a week for 8 hours, 4 days a week for 10 hours, or 3 days a week for 13 hours. Again, it's another. It adds to the problem the idea of hiring a different number of people depending on the demand, and offering the right contract in terms of hours, and while still thinking of minimizing the cost, right? Full-time, part-time, and overtime, they all have different costs. So to add this to the problem, we would have something like the total hours worked for a given nurse I needs to be less than the contracted hours, if it's full-time or part-time, 40 or 20, plus the overtime. So whatever you assign in terms of hours that you assign to that person, it needs to be less than the amount of hours that the person is actually contracted, and the overtime that the person did. And also you have the situation of the daily hours. This is the weekly hours, right? This, in terms of daily hours, you also need to consider the type of contract that the person has signed, and the hours that this contract involves. So a 5-day contract for 8 hours would mean at most 8 hours per day. 10-hour contract for 4 days would have at most 10 hours, and so on. And you also need to consider that the number of contracted days, the number of days that the person actually comes to work, also needs to obey their contract type. So they may be assigned to work for 5 days, 4 days, or 3 days, depending on the contract that you sign with them. In terms of overtime, you also need to respect some limits. In our case, we consider that they would at most work 15 hours overtime a week, and they can't do overtime for both types of contracts, so these are mutually exclusive, which is what these two equations show. You can only have full-time overtime if the person is not working part-time, and the same for part-time. Overtime part-time cannot be assigned unless if the person is working full-time. This is a big M restriction, pretty famous. Can just add a number that is larger than 15 and you're good. More complexity, there's a big difference between having a regular shift and being on call. If you're assigned to a regular shift, you can work on sequential days. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and so on. But if you're on call, you need to get a day off. You can only be assigned to one type, either a regular shift or on call. And if you get assigned to on call shift, the next day you cannot be assigned to on call again or a regular shift. You need to get a day off, which is something that the guys working just at people getting people to work every other day already had. They pretty much just their whole solution was pretty much the same you would get if you just had this restriction, right? If you work, the next day you get a day off, and that's it. And there's no regular shift and any of that. In terms of results, you can see we get something very interesting for each nurse. You can see the different locations. They can send her to different locations based on the different demands. We can see the weekdays that they get to work. This is Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. If they're on call, they get a day off. See, on Sunday, the first nurse it's on call, so on Monday she rests. There's only on Saturday, she gets a regular shift for 12 hours, and she's working with the third type of contract. You can see the same thing, same rules being applied to nurse 2, nurse 3, nurse 4. This is just a simulation for using a Jupyter Notebook. One thing that is pretty interesting, we ended up in this simulation having 10 nurses. This problem grows pretty fast, and if you don't work with a paid solver, you will get into trouble pretty fast. You won't be able to solve for a real problem. Of course, this model has a lot of complexity added to it, the types of shifts, the full-time and part-time, the initial and final hours. But it pretty much shows that if you want to work with a complex problem, it grows large very, 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 very fast. And you're going to need to actually use a solution like Gurobi, which I'm still not convinced it's not actually an alien technology. They'll tell us they did it here on Earth, but I'm not totally convinced. But it's something that is definitely worth it. And this is my contact. If you guys want to talk to me, feel free. Our site is not over here. It's scientia.site. Thank you very much for this presentation. For watching this presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I did working with this problem. As I said, I love complex mathematical problems, and every time people actually bring me a challenge is something that I really enjoy. Okay, so any questions? I don't see our viewers. Do you guys want to make questions to each other? Everybody's shy, right?
No real question. No, I just enjoy assisting, watching all those presentations. It was very nice seeing. Really liked also the Darkhorse model. Fantastic.
Maciej, do you want to add something? Oh, I can't hear you.
There we go. Sorry, hardware muted. Yeah, thank you. That was really interesting. I really like to see different approaches to the scheduling problem. It's one that comes up very often and can have a big impact too. I see it with emergency services quite a bit as well. Like the demand is very variable throughout the day, right? And staffing that with staggered shifts such that you have the exact right amount of people available at each time of the day is challenging problem to solve.
True, and also the cost is also a major issue, right? Hiring the right amount of people with the right contract can make a big difference. And thinking about their well-being in terms of avoiding rush hour, and also there are a lot more restrictions you can add in terms of preferences that some people work with in terms of you should avoid getting these two people together. These other two actually like working with each other and so on, which I sometimes think is a little petty, but I know in the literature this is a major concern, and I actually saw people, especially people working in the entertainment industry, thinking about these preferences about who should work with who.
Yeah.
Is also something you can add, but I mean, there's a lot more complexity that you can add to these kinds of problems.
This kind of variables, I think, can have a big impact on adoption as well, right? If you may have a perfectly optimal model, but if it doesn't consider the little soft factors like that, maybe you can have an equally optimal model that just takes that into consideration, but it makes all the difference between, hey, and the staff are happier, I love this new model, versus this model is great, but I don't think we can use it. Everybody's going to be mad at me.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
I've definitely had that before, where we optimize for model, and it's actually look at the savings here, and it was for a school bus optimization. Look at the savings here, and everybody on average rides the bus shorter, and you use 1 fewer buses or 2 fewer buses, and it's so great. Yes, it is, except you make so much change across every user of the system that the savings just aren't worth it, because this kid used to get on the bus first and now he gets on the bus last, and just all those little things.
True. And working on mathematical models where variables are actually real humans is very tricky, because you may do the best model at all. You may do. It's once you really implement and it's really running in the real life, that's some other constraints are popping up. So you say, oh, okay, I didn't know that you had that constraint. Okay, let's add it, and then such an approach where you are adding complexity, which is very obviously obvious and common approach, makes a lot of sense also by refining your model post go live.
True. Yeah, in real life, I mean, some people don't want to work some hours. They may want to avoid some days. They may have other obligations. So, I mean, it's in real life you need to be able to make those changes, and having a mathematical model to at least start to base yourself in actually can help a lot to make these small tweaks, as long as you have an interesting, good initial point of a solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
David, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just waiting my turn. Thanks, Magno. First of all, Maciej and Emmanuel and Magno, I thought your presentations were awesome. It's always amazing to see how people use optimization in their work and how Gurobi supports people's projects. I just think it's so cool. We have a lot of cases on our website that are fascinating. One is the NFL scheduling. There's a really good video about it. It's one of the cases that's most commonly accessed on our website, and it really is super interesting when you think about what are the constraints and how they pop up as you do your project. And if you read the case or watch the video, you'll see that in the past, when they did it manually, they would only be able to get to maybe 5 solutions and have no idea if the solutions were optimal. And they just have to take one of them because it would take months to get to that, and using an optimizer like Gurobi, they're able to get to thousands of solutions and to measure how close they are to optimal. And even doing that, you still discover constraints that are let's say more political in nature or more negotiable, right? Concerns about that the team owners might have about the order of things, or who they're playing on what date for what reason, and you have to keep adding things like that to your model until you get to your final solution. But by using a solver that allows you to run a huge model and get to solutions, you can open up new opportunities and just think completely differently about your problem. I thought it was really interesting what you said, Magno, about how the models grow in size really fast and complexity, and that the number of variables will increase dramatically, the number of constraints will increase dramatically, rapidly. I know that we have customers that have models with more than 1 million variables and more than 1 million constraints in their models. It's even hard to wrap your head around what that looks like. I always talk about what happens when flights get canceled on airlines, because there's so many moving parts when that happens. You have flight crews and airplanes and ground crews and maintenance crews and gates and gate handlers and baggage handlers. Just so many things happen in so many ways that you solve for the changes that you're forced into by weather conditions or a mechanical failure in an aircraft, and how that just plays out to thousands of passengers around the world, and how you need to solve that problem in real time and get to the optimal solution, because the optimal solution might be 10% better than all the other solutions, and that could save you a ton of money. So I think it's really interesting. Maybe if you could talk more about just how, about the scale of the problems and how the open source solvers just, they're good for getting started, but when you really have a big true problem, you need something more robust.
Yeah, Maciej, you wanna comment on that? I think you work with some free solvers as well, and then switch to Gurobi, right?
Yes.
You also saw an absurd impact, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a model that that's actually how I met Magno. Is helped me rewrite a model into pure Gurobi, because it had been kind of bastardized through a free solver along the way. Actually, it originally started in a different software that was actually probably okay, but didn't have access to it. So we tried to make it work in GLPK, and for very small problems. So we're trying to locate stations, and if we run it on a little pretend system like a college town that I showed, add 1 station across these 5, no problem. That's a really easy model. But then you try to run something like that on a city the size of Toronto, and you have 82 stations with, and you're trying to figure out I can close 5 and I'm going to close 5 stations and open 10 new ones. What's my best thing? You know, not a chance. You're watching this GLPK, you know, sitting at you know,
gonna watch it crash and burn.
Yeah, yeah, with its one thread. No, I mean, you're waiting hours. Sometimes, like, you know, you leave the thing overnight and you come back in the morning, like, okay, it's still at 43%. Let's just forget about it, right? And so we moved to Gurobi, and that was fantastic. You know, I finally made the leap of actually putting it in native Gurobi using the Python API as opposed to just importing an LP model. So yeah, I mean, now it runs pretty smoothly. We can solve the really complex ones within a couple of hours, and the simple ones solve instantly, right? And the benefit that can have to analyst time is huge, right? Because the model's also not right the first time, and there's just nothing more frustrating than having an overnight run of something and then realizing you need another overnight run, except it's the start of the day. So you've just wasted your whole day because, you know, you weren't using a good enough solver. So I can, yeah, definitely vouch for that experience.
Yeah, we hear that all the time. It's amazing. I was talking to a customer just the other day. They have like literally several hundred people that are waiting for the results of the optimizer that runs overnight. And if it doesn't solve, they have to work with a suboptimal solution, or just twiddle their thumbs until it does solve. You know, so speed actually really makes a difference on a daily basis. And it also what we hear from partners is really interesting is it when you get like a level shift in the speed. You know, when you go from solving in an hour to solving in a minute, or solving, you know, overnight to solving in an hour, it can unlock like different business possibilities. Or if you can just simply solve the model, right? If it would take on another solver a week, or you don't even know how long it would, you know, it never solves. Like you're whatever the benefit of that solution is or would be is lost to you. And so if you can get a solver that's faster, and we'll get to that, it just literally unlocks new ways of seeing the world, new ways of doing business, which is just amazing.
Yeah, that's actually the next step for us too. I can check mark that comment as well. You know, when originally what we developed was, this is a consulting model. This is something we're going to do for you know, a presentation that's weeks away and present all of these different solutions, kind of thing. And you know, now that we can solve the model very quickly, we're starting to think, well, could we just put this right in the app and have the user request a scenario and it comes back with an answer in a few minutes? Like, you know, and that's wasn't something we could have been thinking of before.
That's amazing. Absolutely. Like it goes from being like this thing that you run, you know, in a batch process, to like a real-time thing that you create an interface to and put it on the web, and the users just do it themselves. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, and I also like to comment, especially to people that are actually starting to work with these kinds of problems. Actually building the whole model in Gurobi also has a huge advantage in terms of building the time it takes to actually build the model, because after you write all your constraints that that you need to solve, if you have a large model in terms of different families of constraints and a large number of constraints in each family, if you actually work with something like Gurobi and also with a large number of variables, using some stuff like QuickSum can make a huge difference just in terms of building the model. When I work with I remember working with some free libraries that just to not even start solving, just to build it, took like 20-30 minutes running a script just to write all the variables and constraints. And if you write everything in Gurobi, it also makes a huge difference in just to write the model. So again, hats off to the staff at Gurobi that I've had the pleasure of meeting once live, and my hats off goes to their product as well, because it's amazing. It's definitely the best solver in the market, and it's still, if you want to work with a professional problem, if you want to, I mean, save the big bucks, it definitely is worth it.
That's awesome to hear from you guys. Yeah, I would just make one more pitch, because I know you mentioned, Magno, that you don't have access to your own license. We have a partner program that involves developer licenses, and we are super engaged with the developer community. We have lots of different facilities around that. We also have an academic program where we provide free licenses to academics. So there's a lot of ways that we have always and continue to work to put the solver in people's hands so they can really solve problems and make it easy for you to do amazing things for your own customers.
Sure, I'll have to look it up. I remember I used to work, before founding my own company, I used to work for a consultancy that used an academic version of Gurobi, and I didn't really like that. It was something that made me feel a bit uneasy, uncomfortable, because they were using it for a commercial purpose. But so when I started my own company, I preferred to just, whenever I talk to customers that actually wanted something like that, I would always prefer to come out and say, I don't have a license. I remember I talked to Maciej about this when we started working, because I think fair is fair, right? You guys took a lot of time and a lot of investment building this amazing product, and if people are actually using it for a commercial purpose, you should get a commercial version. And if you are using for academic purpose, for sure, go ahead and take advantage of one of the academic licenses. And now that you're talking about this development support, I think it's something that I definitely want to try it as well.
Good.
For sure.
Let's talk about that.
Okay, my friends, I guess that's it. We don't have any more questions. Any last comments?
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Magno.
It was great having you guys here.
We're pleased to know you. We have to talk more, Magno. We are based in Belo Horizonte, actually.
Right.
So you're from Rio, right?
Yeah, I'm in Rio.
Excellent. So let's keep in touch now.
Sure. Maybe trade some more mathematical modeling. I'll certainly enjoy that.
Good. Well, I hope to see you guys in Brazil as well. I don't know, I didn't mention any of this, but I spent 20 years in Brazil. I speak Portuguese, and I will definitely be in and out of Brazil sometimes. And I definitely would love to catch up with you guys in Belo Horizonte. And
we shall greet you very well, my friend. And you too, Maciej, if you have the opportunity, come on down.
I really hope I can take advantage of that one day. Thank you.
All right, we're going to have to organize a meeting in Rio, for sure.
For sure.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Bye-bye.